was so long ago. Like we literally thought this was gonna last 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, we're recording now, and
oh, we are.
Forteza is with me. Welcome back.
Hi, Tigran. I'm so glad to be back. We're already having fun.
Yeah, it's great. So you were talking about, well, we were talking about the last time you were on. We spoke in June, end of June, I think, and I uploaded the podcast in July 3rd. And it was so fun talking to you. You do so many different things, and I know during this time, you've just really done it well. Where you've done so many different projects. You act. You're also a singer, and you're also just this rock star of I don't even know what the title is. Maybe you could help me, but you're really, you know how to navigate the social media world and really put the classical music, especially classical music, in opera, the opera world, in the spotlight. And I think a lot of the times people have a hard time with that type of stuff, and you do it so well. So a little bit about what you've been doing the past 3 months. Or what was it, July? So the 4 or 5 months I haven't seen you.
Damn. That it went by fast, huh? Well, I've kept myself busy somehow. I think a lot of times I'm one of those people, I just like go, and I don't believe in boredom. Like I don't understand how people can ever be bored. As tough as this entire time has been, I mean, since the beginning, I just, whenever I'm having a hard time, I'm like, we have the internet. We are so, for those, because there are also people who don't have access to the internet, of course. So for those of us who have access to it, not only to work, but to, connect with others like we're doing right now, I think that has been such a huge help. And, and on those hard days, I think about that. I'm like, well, what if we didn't have the internet? Like this would be a whole different story. So I've been busy on all those aspects that you mentioned. Acting wise, we haven't finished that project yet. So I'm still part of it, this radio drama series. I'm part of a company called the Evening Crane Theater, and our director and writer and producer, he does everything. He was like, well, let's do something during this time. And he wrote this radio drama series in 5 episodes. I've been recording in my little like tiny closet. So it's been an experience, and his editing side of it has been insane because it's a big cast and we're all spread out around the country. Like nobody is together, and doing these dialogues, as an actor, it's a huge challenge to create these dialogues when, I mean, we would rehearse it, like read through it together, but then when you're recording, you don't have the other person, so that's been super interesting work. Also, what happened after we talked the first time is that with this same company, we went to the Bardavan Opera House, upstate New York in Poughkeepsie, and we had the opera house for ourselves for an entire week. I don't know how the renting side of that happened. That was on him, on our director. But basically, we were there for an entire week, and we filmed stage readings of all of his plays. And he's still releasing, he's in the editing process, but he already released a couple of them, 2 or 3 of them that he shared in Halloween and Thanksgiving. And I mean, that was super cool. I had to play like, I forget what it was, but it was like 15 different characters. And, I look back at that, and it's just, that ability to be in a space with other artists working, and, and in the opera world, I think something that's changing a lot is that now that we're experimenting so much more with recording and film, I was so used to doing a project and it being over, and then you move on to this next thing. And now we're introducing this new aspect of like, oh, things live on, right? And it's months after you did the work, and all of a sudden, like, it finally comes out and you get to share that with everyone. It's a very different feeling. So that was a really cool project that happened. In opera, I was a part of Teatro Grattaciello's Fedora, which was also one of the magical situations that they were able to find a space, and we filmed it and recorded live in a space in Brooklyn. And then they did some of the editing process, and they released it basically as a film performance. So there are things happening, which has been, and also like virtual collaborations, but those were two big projects that were, like actual productions where we were able to work together in a space with other artists. So yeah, since we last talked, those were two big projects I was a part of.
And of course, you've done countless interviews at this point. I follow some of them when I can, but you do so many because, as I said before, and we'll talk about this more, but you're so well prepared and knowledgeable about really presenting opera and classical music to the world, which is the first reason why I stumbled upon your page, and I was really interested, and because I found it really interesting, even though I'm a conductor, but not so much in the opera world. So your presentation of what you do on social media was so interesting that it got my attention right away. So
that's the best compliment you could give me.
so it's great. And I know many people do that. I know many people do that with your page and the type of work that you do. But one more important thing that happened to you, and I don't know how much of this you want to get into because I know it's a bit personal, but you got married.
I got married. Yeah, I was like, you started saying that. I was like, oh yes, I got married, by the way. Yes. So it was, I tell everyone, it was super nice in a way, because we were already basically planning to do a city hall thing this year and planning for a bigger celebration next year anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we had, a insane party plan for this year and we had to reschedule. So we were already planning for a first more chill part this year. And we kept waiting and waiting because City Hall was closed and there were like no news about it. There was like no information. You could get what was interesting to me is that you were able to get your marriage license online, basically on a Zoom call, very easy, very organized. But then from City Hall, like their information was so vague. Like City Hall itself wasn't offering anything virtual. So yeah, the way you do this now that things are a little bit more open, it might be different. But in August, what we did is like we found someone who was ordained, and you do it via Zoom. And we're lucky enough that my husband's cousin has a beautiful home, and so they hosted us there, and it was a beautiful summer day. And then we had because my family's not in the States, so we had everyone tuning in, a lot of people from Argentina, France, everywhere in the world. Ooh, sorry, that's a call. So yeah, that happened in August, and it wasn't exactly as planned, but it had its own charm, I would say.
That's awesome. Since you mentioned Argentina and France, I have to ask, and I think we talked about this briefly on when we were about to schedule this. Tell me a little bit about the traditions, especially since it's the holiday season. What does your family, and I know I have some family in France, some in Argentina, what do they do during this time, or what did you do growing up?
So for me, this is such a particular situation. It's so like my family especially, it's a little odd because this is where my thing of like not really being from anywhere becomes a little complicated, because I'm usually never in the States at this time of the year. I always, even from, it kind of stayed from being in school, like winter break, I go back home to Argentina. And I grew up, so I had a couple Christmases in Paris when I was very little, but then after that, most of them have been in Argentina. And it's a very different experience because it's the middle of the summer and it's really hot. So, it's very weird for me to be here
Yeah.
with winter, with snow. And usually people like that. For me, it's very much, like I want to be in the summer. So I would say, in Argentina, it's very uh, inevitably, when it's warmer and all these like marketing images of Christmas are in the winter, and it's a very different vibe, I feel like, unless you're, more religious and like Catholic and really you know um celebrate in that way, especially Christmas. I don't know, it's like way more chill. Like the Christmas spirit is like more about just like partying. Like um and music wise, there's a couple. Again, it's more associated with religion, I think. And there is one piece, and this I wanted to mention. There's one, because I get asked all the time, right? When I'm around for Christmas concerts, and oh, bring something from your country, to sing. And there's this piece called Misa Criolla by Ramirez. And I love the Messiah. The Messiah is amazing. But this is such a good alternative. And it was very popular like in the 80s. And now not so much. I was lucky enough in my undergrad back in Philly, we actually performed it. But I'm just putting it out there. I wish this piece, it's a choral piece, it's a mass, but it's a criolla mass. So it's a very Argentinian, like folk rhythms and dance, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I think there's a couple of recordings. There's one with Jose Carreras that it's absolutely gorgeous. So, it's really a choral piece. It has soloists, but I try to, excerpt little pieces here and there, and always present it in concerts whenever I get asked to. That I would say is like very, very, it's a Argentinian gem.
And you said Jose Carreras, and I can't believe he's over 70 now.
He's still singing. I was
Yeah.
actually helping promote a concert with him that was supposed to happen this weekend. It was going to be this huge live stream with Maria Bulegina. They were going to do it from Bulgaria with the Sofia Orchestra Ballet. Awesome show. And unfortunately, they had to postpone it to May. Because I think they couldn't figure out, things are so uncertain, and it was going to be a big, big cast. So with the whole like virus logistics, they decided to postpone it to May. But yeah, he's amazing. It's like, I just admire so much these artists that you can tell that if they stop, they just won't be able to live anymore. It's so like art and music is so ingrained in who they are as living beings. And I think that's very, very inspiring.
Yeah. Well, since we last spoke, I said it was 4 or 5 months. And since the pandemic started, it's about 9 or 10 months. Specifically, the last 4 or 5 months, everything that you've seen helping promote these events, concerts, online things, some things that you've noticed, and you don't have to say names or organizations, but some things that you've noticed that are not going as well for certain organizations, you wish they did better, and maybe some things that you're like, wow, that I wasn't even thinking that, I saw that organization do it, they did it really well. So a couple of things that you've seen, good and bad, from what's happened, and maybe
Yeah.
listening could learn from that experience.
Yeah, I'm actually like revisiting. It's funny you asked this because I started to kind of revisit everything that's been happening since this whole thing started, because I'm going to be holding the 360 of Opera Awards at the beginning of January. It's something I started last year. So right now we're picking nominees, with one of my editors, and then we're going to have the people vote.
That's awesome.
So, but this is actually something I was thinking about earlier today, because the learning curve, I mean, for all of us, has been insane, and there's a lot of, which I know it's a little bit inevitable, like the negative talk of like, like it's never going to be the same, like how, we need the theaters to be full. And like, yes, I mean, all of that is absolutely valid. But at the same time, for me, like the advancement that we've had in creativity, technology, fusion of arts and collaboration is, it's progress comes out of crisis. So I definitely see, and it's not like it's going to be like that forever. We need to learn to merge that as the real world comes back. But I think, especially with singing, right? Because the whole mic situation, and really be able to, and the live streaming voices, it's very, very tough to do well unless you have a really big budget. So I think at the beginning, everyone was really trying to figure that out and do these live Zoom concerts. And most often than not, it just didn't work, and even when you look at like the first gala the Met did back in May, I think it was, it was it was very impressive what they did. It was actually like very smooth, but still you could see, these people were singing live from their houses into computers. Like not everyone had great mics, so it was still kind of on and off, like sound quality wise. And to do it once, it's fine, it's something different. But to consistently be like watching like Zoom concerts with bad sound, it gets old. So I think like a few months in, people started realizing that pre-recording material, especially with voices, with operatic voices, which it's already in a regular recording situation, it's already a challenge to record operatic voices well. So I think that was a good move, to pre-record the material. And then something that people are doing now that I think is very successful is, to mix the pre-recording performance with some of the people, like a host who's doing it live. You have a live chat. So you're actually having a live stream premiere, but the musical numbers are pre-recorded. I think that's a good format. And now, that we're having all these Christmas concerts, you have a lot of very successful events that are happening. And then, as some restrictions were lifted, as I was speaking about the Grattacielo project, where you were at least able to have a cast and crew together and film something and record a performance, even if it's without an audience, because then at least the performance is of high quality. And this, I encourage everyone to go to Teatro Grattacielo website. You can stream this performance. And it's, everyone's adapting, everyone's learning. And then you have another problem where that it's this, like, how do you replace live audience that's buying tickets with people who are buying live streams? And at the beginning everything was free, and then we started to have to charge for tickets. So it's been a transition, but I think the two things that kind of like stood out for me is this. At the beginning there was a lot of, we're all trying to figure out what to do, but this like live singing on Zoom, it's just, it's fine for, maybe a master class, lessons. I mean, we don't really have an option. Like, you can figure out ways to still work, but performance wise, I think we're a bit past that now. And since in most places you can still at least meet in a studio, a singer and a pianist. And now I feel like now by Christmas, I mean, this weekend there were so many performances, so many concerts, and most of it now I feel like it's a pretty decent quality. So it's been a learning curve. Yeah.
Wow. I was thinking about, major organizations, million-dollar organizations that all of the major cities have, but also smaller organizations. And in some ways during this time, from my personal experience, I've just enjoyed the smaller organization presentations
Absolutely.
much more. And also in some ways, I felt like the lack of presentation or something from the major organizations, I haven't found the excitement from that to be interested in what they're doing. So I've been following smaller organizations. Any chance, what are your thoughts about possibly the future and how this will might change the way that we look at smaller organizations and support smaller organizations?
I'm there with you. It's very interesting, what's happened, because in a way, so pre-pandemic, I here in New York, there's a lot of smaller companies that are super creative, right? And I was already, because I was also involved as an artist with those, in the new music scene. I was already showing a lot of that on 360, but I think this whole situation not has really kind of opened up the doors for these smaller, very, very creative companies to showcase their creativity, not only to their small, New York scene or like smaller city scene, but to the world, and one example is the Decameron Opera Coalition, that I did a red carpet with them. And I forget the exact number, but it's like, let's say like 10 independent opera companies from the US that got together to, put together these episodes of different stories and short performances based on topics from the Decameron. And it was just like insane. And I feel like this situation has not only like pushed these companies that were already used to having to be super creative, not only from an artistic point of view, but because when you have less resources, you got to figure it out. And it has opened up the doors of the world to them. They have like way more visibility right now, but also the things they've come up with are just incredible, so innovative, new music, and yeah, so in that sense I'm very happy. I've seen them do, like City Lyric Opera is another company here in New York, uh, very young, small indie, and they did several projects, but they did a three-penny opera that was a mix of this, right? They filmed some parts, and some parts were like live on Zoom, and it was insane. And I think it is because the bigger organizations rely more in their stars, right? And the smaller organizations, like their leverage was the creativity. And in a situation like this, the it helped people who are creative. When the bigger houses, they suffered so much with not being able to have public there, not being able, like artists having to cancel because they can't travel, just not financially speaking, not being able to hold, a performance, because if they don't have at least half of the house filled, it just makes no sense. So yeah, I absolutely agree that in a sense, smaller organizations with smaller budgets had a smaller risk in a sense, you know, and we're able to really, really successfully come up with just, you know, insanely creative performances. I guess in a way they're more flexible organizations, you know, because the bigger ones, I mean, the money is just such a big component of the whole machine, you know, you can't ignore it.
Going back, I asked this, I want to rephrase it a little bit differently, but
Uh-huh.
specific to social media, since you've been able to do so well, again, I want maybe some ideas for people who are lagging in that aspect. First, the importance of social media for artists. You know, sometimes we say, oh, we're classical musicians, and, you know, a lot of our audience is 60 and over or something, and they don't even use social media. Why should we have social media if most of our audience doesn't even have it? That aspect, but also how you've been able to really, what kind of things did you do early on to get that aspect started? Because like I've said before, you've been very successful.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think now more than ever, you know, we live in a world where we're in constant virtual communication. So, you know, if there was a time for social media, it's right now. And it's been not just for promotion, you know, I feel like it's been very much a part of artistry and creativity and, you know, making art and joining, reinforcing that message that art is inherently social and political and that you can't separate them. You know, with everything that happened this year, I saw so many interesting things happening on social media with artists and collaborations and people helping each other out. And it all always, for me, it all goes down to communication, right? And when we talk about, you know, audiences and why our audiences in classical music, maybe of a certain age group, with, I don't always like totally agree, because I know so many like younger people who are into it. um, but it's all about communication, and I think somewhere down the line, you know, as time went by, some of that communication stopped being effective, uh, to and put classical music in a place that it wasn't always there. You know, it can and it should be closer to popular culture. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. And but now it's been a long time of it not being that way. So, you know, having that social media presence and merging classical music culture with pop culture and with everyday information and with everyday things that are happening in the world, is only going to bring us closer to all types of audiences. And, you know, why not? I just don't understand why people wouldn't use it. You know, when it's something that's available to you, that's one more means of communication and expressing your message. And also, like, especially Instagram, I mean, when you go by topics, you know, there's like, you can discover things you've never knew about, you know, companies you never knew about, because it's not like, I mean, yes, there's a lot of smaller indie organizations like maybe in California or in New York, but in Europe as well, you know. And it's or everywhere really in the world, so you really get to connect with people from all over the world that you wouldn't if not. You know, I have so many people that I consider friends, like you, for example, you know, like people in the arts that I've met through social media. And, you know, and I know that if we find a moment to meet up for a coffee, like it's going to be this, we're going to be talking the same way, you know. And that's, I feel like that's such a huge advantage that this generation has, you know, this ability to be so connected to the entire world. And of course you have to like have boundaries, and we can't be online all day, but, you know, I have a bunch of friends like in Italy, and I'm in constant communication about collaborations and arts and what's happening there in the opera scene. And So, I think if you use it smartly, it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've been talking to some, board members and people who are organizing concerts, trying to see what the plan might be, and it's so uncertain, and no one knows what's going to happen next and when we could get back together. But your thoughts about, when we do get back together, what's going to be the response from the audience? And I know it's speculation, it's just kind of thinking, but you're in this and you're constantly observing audiences and people who are just following you and seeing what you're doing, whether they're musicians or non-musicians. What are your thoughts? I mean, when we do get back together, what do you imagine the experience to be from an audience perspective?
I, and I'm not like, I'm a positive person, but I'm very much a realist.
Mhm.
But still, I think, I don't believe that argument, that some people have, that, like, people are going to be scared, people are not going to return to the theaters. And I don't believe that, because as much, as we can do amazing things with recordings, a lot of people are recording albums right now, which is amazing. Like, when we look back in history, there's going to be like this year a lot of recording albums. That's something that people are able to do now, but nothing replaces that experience of the live performance for the artist, but for the audience. Because music, it's not just what goes into your ears, it's a full, like, spiritual mind body vibrations experience. It's like a meditation, and nothing replaces that. And I think, proof is, like, tomorrow on 360, well, today we have a girl who's doing a takeover from Salzburg, from the Mozarteum, where they are recording their opera performance that's going to be able to stream. So she's showing us the behind the scenes. But tomorrow I have one of my really good friends who's in Barcelona, where, Madrid and Barcelona overall, they've been able to do a lot of opera performances, more than in a lot of places. And yeah, it's a reduced audience, but they're doing it. And she's going to be there tomorrow and she's going to tell us her experience. Um, but the proof is like, yeah, it's way less tickets that they're able to sell, but they sell out. Like, people are so thirsty to experience things live. And I think this whole pandemic has given us so much perspective and appreciation for the things that maybe we were taking for granted before. As performers, I think, I see it in the people who have been able to do some things here and there, even if it's like, I know I have close friends who have rehearsed an entire show and not been able to perform it. It happened recently in Zurich. And, you know, anyway, they're happy that they were able to work for that month, because for us, rehearsal is work. And to make music with other people and to appreciate the process. And then when some of us do get to perform, even if it's a very small audience, it has a whole other meaning. I feel like, in a way, this perspective has elevated the arts even more. The spiritual aspect of it, the just the transformation, as humans, that we have every time we go in and out of the theater, of a concert hall. And, yeah, it's going to be tough financially, mostly. I think that's our biggest issue here, right? Too, because as much as we don't want to think about it, it's still a business. It has to make sense number wise. So to me, that's like the biggest challenge. We have to trust science and, I guess, politicians somehow. But we have to have some level of trust that this is gonna get resolved, and is if we as citizens are being responsible too, of course, and that eventually things are going to start getting better. But for the arts, you know, I think this has pushed all of us on so many levels that I think in a way it will only make all of us and what we produce better.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's our biggest challenge here. Added to the health challenge, of course, is the financial aspect, you know, and that's why we can't let go. Like we have to fight and to ask for governments for help, to ask people for help. Like people need to support the arts because the you know mankind needs the arts.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And
it.
and something you said about, the performance, it's also just so great to be in a space with your community, or maybe not the community, maybe outsiders who are visiting the community are experiencing the theater. And I'm sure it happens a lot more in New York and LA, but also other cities in the US where, it brings the community together. And it's just nice to experience something sitting next to other people and feeling that energy, and also talking to other people after the concert, even if it's just a few words of saying, "Oh, that was a great performance," or "I like that part." It was, it's just bringing
Yeah.
community together. It's such a beautiful thing, and I think that some of the amazing recording companies that have done so well in putting shows together for all of us virtually, I think they're fantastic, and the quality is great, and everything. So the presentation is great, but coming together in one space is such a beautiful thing. And even with some, maybe mistakes, and it happens with live performances, things fall apart sometimes, but even that is just so great, and I miss that
Yeah.
aspect of being in a performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday I did a Christmas concert at a church in the Bronx, and you know we had to sing with the face shields, and you know it wasn't nothing about it was ideal. And you know they had a couple people from the church, and then they streamed it also. And but it was that, you know, it was so special to be able to sing for people live, to hear their thoughts after, you know. And especially right now, you know, with the holidays, like everyone's in such need of that, what you were saying, you know, community, helping each other out. And yeah, it's very special.
I've had you on the podcast before, and I've asked this question, but as we grow, even if it's just a few months, things change and you have a new perspective on things. Advice to young musicians going through this time. I know you answered this before, but maybe
Mm,
you'll have something new to say, possibly.
yeah, we're definitely in a different world already. um okay, so advice. Well, first of all, since we touched on it earlier, definitely, you know, develop your tech skills, social media presence. Not so much, you know, because I do notice, especially in the opera world, there's a little bit of like this pressure on it for young artists, like, oh, you have to, you know, like have a certain number of followers. Or I think it's more about having a presence, you know, existing everywhere. As I say, you know, have a profile everywhere. Choose the one that you like most, where you're gonna, you know, put in the work. But use it really to communicate what you have to say. I think at this point it has to be a part of one of the tools in your box as an artist, because there's so much we can say through social media and connect with the audience. You know, like right now, in a way, our audience is out there in the digital world. So I would really encourage everyone to, you know, spend the time on that without obsessing over it. Boundaries, that's good. And I think last time I had mentioned this idea of taking care of your head, you know, and how we have to spend so much time building our skills and our technique and learning our repertoire. And I mean, that's something that you can't not do. Like it has to happen. Um, but especially now, I mean, we see it so much, you know, after having to deal with, I mean, who would have thought if you asked us exactly a year ago, I mean, this was just starting in Asia, but no one would have thought that this would be the world we were going to be in, and the future is so uncertain. So of course, for young musicians right now, you ask yourselves a lot of questions, because it's like, why do we put in all this work if there's not going to be opportunities? Like, I know people are asking themselves this, but I there's always going to be opportunities, because there's always people out there that are really creative, that are making things happen. So we have to trust that, and we have to keep going, but we also very much need to focus on this, in building our our the psychological aspect of this career, and our mental strength, and our inner peace. It's now more than ever is as important as all the practicing you need to do, because things happen, as we are seeing. Things can get very uncertain. There can be crisis, things you can't predict. And the stronger you are mentally, the more able you're to remain flexible in a way, on the outside, and to adapt, and to, get creative, and figure out ways to keep doing what you were put in this world to do, if it's really your calling. So, yeah, that's very important. So, and it can be many things, and that's your own inner search. It can be meditating, it can be, for some people it's religion, it can be reading, whatever it is, you got to find that thing that keeps you grounded and feeds your inner self.
Well said. And we could go on talking forever. I think we're out of time now. I like to keep it around 40-45 minutes. Anything else you want to add before we end?
Well, thank you so much for having me back. I love what you do. I love talking with you. We could literally, I feel like we could just keep going. Um, I I want to thank you for everything you've been sharing on your social media channels about your country and everything that's happening there, because that's a very good example, I think, of um, sharing valuable and useful information that we are not necessarily getting everywhere. For me, with my background, I don't know much about the history of your country and what's happening there. And for me, it was, you were exposing me to that. And that's about what it is, right? To like talk about what we care in hopes to exposing other people, and influence what other people are reading and thinking about, and because of that, I did a lot of reading, and I tried to understand um, something that's very much outside of my own reality and experience, and I think that's a perfect example of the power of social media.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's been an interesting thing. I mean, we could talk about this as well, but that's been an interesting thing for me, specific to social media, is just how much of the personal things you want to talk about, how much of the, and I know we got into this the first time you came on, but how much of the personal things and so-called political things at times, that and how much of just the art. And for me, for a long time, it's always been about just talking about the music stuff that I do, or the podcast that I do, just kind of keeping it very concentrated on that. And I personally, for a long time, I mean, even when I was more active on Facebook, I didn't like sharing pictures of family and even my son. I'm very,
I'm very glad you share pictures of your son, because he's adorable.
Thank you. but it's I've tried to kind of kind of separate them, but I think from what I remember talking to you the first time, and from what I've seen you do, is that it's really good to kind of have a balance and mixing it up of what you do personally, but also other things. So my social media has been very much on focusing a lot more on Armenia and my home country, but I try to mix it up still, and I put some musical stuff out there as well. So
Yeah.
I'm also learning from just watching a lot of the things that you do on both 360 of Opera, but also your personal channel, your page as well. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think just one last thing, as you said, that one thing that I think is positive with everything that we've dealt with this year is that a lot of walls have been, just destroyed in a sense, especially with social media, yeah, I think even up to last year, like I feel like everyone got much more real this year, and I really appreciate that. Again, like it's good to have certain boundaries. Like you don't need to be like showing everyone every single second of your day, but this mix that I speak about, like professional and some of the, maybe not even personal, but the things that you care about, and that are important to you, and especially with all the social and political changes we dealt with this year, I very much appreciated this, people being more real, and this ability to speak about things that are important instead of, not saying anything because, oh, what might people think? What might people say? Well, if it's something very important to you and it goes back to being artists, we don't just make pretty music. Like it has a message, and as artists we have to have a message, and we have to fight for it, not just with the music. So I think that's something very important that happened this year in the arts, in social media, with people also, in the way we communicate. So I think that's something very positive, and it is some light in all this mess that we're dealing with.
Well, thanks so much for joining me. Have a beautiful holiday week, couple of weeks, and hopefully I'll see you in 2021.
Yes, thank you so much, and happy holidays to you and your family and everyone who's listening.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.